A shocking challenge is hitting Petronas, and they could very well give up 90% of their entire gas revenue, and this could eventually affect Malaysia's economy worse than you could have ever imagined. In case you haven't heard, something big is brewing between Petronas and also the Sarawak State Government, and what they are fighting over is none other than the lifeblood of our nation: gas. Sarawak has been very clear about what they want. Petronas must hand over control of liquefied natural gas (LNG) to its own Sarawak state-owned company, PETROS, by 1st of October 2024. Well, supposedly, and as you're watching this video, the dispute is still ongoing with no clear decision yet. But I spent the past couple of months following this story to uncover one simple yet daunting conclusion. Should Petronas lose this fight, Malaysians are not ready for what's to come. Allow me to explain. To date, oil and gas are among the most important industries in Malaysia, and it's a known fact that Petronas as a GLC holds a strong monopoly over the industry, commanding the largest market share and remaining the most valuable Malaysian brand consecutively for 14 years straight. And what's more, in 2024 alone, they are expected to contribute at least 32 billion ringgit to our federal government revenue. While monopolies often get nasty reputation, they are not always a bad thing. In industries requiring huge capital investments and benefiting from economies of scale like utilities or the infrastructure industry, having one large vertically integrated company including exploration, processing, refining and sales can actually be more efficient than having numerous smaller competitors. Think of it like building a railway system. It's simply more efficient for one company to lay down all the tracks as compared to multiple companies trying to construct overlapping routes. And Petronas isn't just another oil and gas company. It is protected under the 1974 Petroleum Development Act, which granted them exclusive rights and power over Malaysia's oil and gas resources. You see, before 1974, our country's petroleum was mostly controlled by foreign companies, especially Shell and Esso, which dominated upstream production, downstream refining and even the sales. This act was simply designed to reclaim control over our petroleum resources, and within the same year, Petronas was incorporated for this very purpose. And in return, the government became their majority shareholder and has been enjoying lucrative dividends from Petronas ever since. And throughout the years, Petronas and the various state governments have been fulfilling the profit-sharing formula that they previously agreed with, where both the oil-producing state and the federal government receive 5% of oil royalties. So Petronas' side of the story seems pretty solid to me. But to Sarawak, it's an entirely different narrative. Sarawak bases its claims on a different foundation, a story that can be traced back when Sarawak wasn't even a part of Malaysia. In 1954, the UK issued a document that allowed North Borneo to include the continental shelf as part of its territories, aka the seabed area outside of Sarawak's coast, which essentially granting them the oil and natural gas resources. Then, just a few years before joining Malaysia, Sarawak passed the Oil Mining Ordinance (OMO) to regulate oil mining within its borders, which basically allowed them to establish their control over these resources. So, here's the dilemma. On one side, we have documents dated before independence governing Sarawak's mining, and on the other hand, there's the 1974 Act granting Petronas the right to mine the petroleum nationally. See the conflict now? Which one should override one another? Well, Petronas obviously believes the latter document holds authority, and makes sense lah. Usually we just use whatever is the latest, right? From their perspective, Sarawak had agreed upon the profit sharing, then requested an extra 5% sales tax which they settled on in 2021, and now they want even more. And so Petronas maintains that they did not overstep their exploration rights. They are legally protected and are not willing to give in. However, from Sarawak's point of view, their continental shelf was established back in 1954 and shouldn't change just because they joined Malaysia. They also claim that the old oil mining ordinance was never officially abolished, so it should still remain valid today. And to make things even more complicated, both Sarawak and Sabah have rejected the Malaysia Territorial Sea Act 2012, which limits their territorial waters to just 3 nautical miles from the coast. They demand a much longer coverage of 200 nautical miles, claiming it's only fair because the UK back then had granted them so. However, research suggests that Sarawak's claim may not align with international law and that the federal government typically has the final say on the sea territories. And to add salt to their wound, the document doesn't explicitly mention the 200 nautical miles, so you can imagine a lot of ping pong is going on around that. At the moment, Petros have been granted the role of a sole aggregator, which basically gives them the right to distribute, supply and sell Sarawak's gas to all downstream gas buyers. And because of that, Petronas may have to cease all their buying and selling activities in Sarawak. And since they're gonna earn less in a segment that takes up 22% of their domestic capital expenditure, obviously they will spend less and scale back on their drilling and also their exploration. Basically all of their upstream businesses. And guess what? Less drilling and exploration, where would you get more gas to sell? The effects of this would eventually trickle down to Petros in the downstream as well. And you thought this would stop the Sarawak State Government from backing down a little bit? Nope. In fact, they are still actively pushing Petronas to grant them complete control over the buying, selling, price fixing, supply and also distribution of LNG in Sarawak. And let's call a spade a spade. Petros is simply not Petronas, not even close. Petronas has been around for more than 50 years, is ranked among the Fortune Global 500 as one of the world's largest corporations, and has presence in over 100 countries with more than 46,000 employees. Meanwhile, Petros was only incorporated 7 years ago in 2017 with less than 500 employees, and their first petroleum exploration only started in 2021. Do they really have the expertise? Are they ready to take on a mega project from Petronas? Starting a massive oil operation is not like opening a small shop. Oil and gas is known for its high entry barriers. You need massive startup costs, proprietary technology, supply chains, and much more. It's going to be incredibly difficult to acquire the right expertise overnight, place them in the right positions and run the company perfectly. So this is a double-edged sword even for Sarawak, because if Petros cannot perform as expected, it could backfire on their economy very hard. And if that happens, we can certainly expect a huge revenue drop for the Petronas group, which, surprise surprise, contributes about 20% of our federal revenue. That's 1/5. So losing this income could have massive ripple effects to our nation's budget and even our broader economy. And don't think this is none of our business. EPF and Amanah Saham are some of the biggest shareholders of Petronas. So indirectly, you and I also own part of Petronas through our retirement and also our investment funds. Any drop in revenue will eventually impact us all. But on the flip side, if Petros successfully handles the transition, Sarawak would pocket much more revenue than the current profit sharing allows, and Sarawakians are expected to receive benefits that used to be shared among all Malaysians. No wonder Sarawak is fighting so hard for it. Although this raises a very interesting question for us, the rakyat. To what extent should resources be kept within a particular jurisdiction? Should control be at the national level or at the state level? If we shift to the state level, each state would operate on its own, which could lead to a different set of challenges like increased competition, weaker negotiation power, and so on. And let's not pretend this is a one-off case. If Sarawak gets what they want, this could set a precedent for other states to demand more control over their oil and gas resources. Kelantan and Terengganu might be next, given their history of disputes over production sharing contracts. Sabah, which has already imposed a 5% sales tax alongside Sarawak, might also seek full state ownership if Sarawak succeeds. Today, as it stands, Sarawak hosts 44% of the country's gas reserves and 39% of oil reserves, while Sabah has 32% of Malaysia's oil reserves and 8% of its gas. Together, the two states combined control a massive amount of Malaysia's oil and gas reserves. If they decide to reclaim these resources, I would think that the future of oil and gas in Malaysia would look very different. So, if we boil this down to its core, this fight over oil and gas is really about federal power versus state power. Personally, I understand where Sarawak is coming from, but I'm not convinced about their ability to pull this off. Even if they do, will the average citizen eventually receive the benefits? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. You see, Sarawak ranks 3rd in Malaysia for its poverty rate, yet you would hear many Sarawakians being filthy rich. In fact, it has one of the highest Gini coefficients in Malaysia, which means there is a significant wealth gap, even larger than those in Kuala Lumpur. And it is very unusual since big cities typically have higher inequality, so you can't blame me if I'm a little skeptical on the state government's efficiency. Can Sarawak actually utilize the revenue to develop its state, or will the money eventually disappear into a black hole? Let's witness history together.